Hey everybody, in this video I just want to go over the activity of observing Facebook, excuse me, the activity of observing YouTube. But either one, Facebook or YouTube actually, is going to start with this same idea of looking at the base communication unit. We talked about this in an earlier slideshow or video that I've made for you, but I just want to go over it now again, and I'll probably go over it again and again at the start of each new platform. Okay, so the base communication unit is built on the idea, or built off of the idea, of the transactional model of communication. In your observation activity this week, you'll hear me refer to that, the transactional model of communication, regularly. So what that is it's this idea that a person sends out a signal to an audience. Could be one person, could be a million or a billion people, doesn't matter. Then that person gets a signal back from them, and then there's a change in that person. Okay, so the person who originally sent it, and that that transaction back and forth between the sender and the receiver, and most importantly, the change that occurs between them as they each go back and forth, coming to a shared understanding about whatever it is they're communicating about, is the base communication unit that specifically send out a signal, one part of the unit. The receiver gets it, sends back another part of the signal, the feedback. So there's a send, a feedback, and then a change. Okay? And the change from the base communication unit perspective is around the person who originally, or the entity that originally sent out the signal. Okay. Now, that base model means that multiple loops are going on at a time, because as soon as I send out a signal to you and you give me feedback, your feedback is the start of a signal, the start of a loop for you. So we're people communicating are always on alternating ends of that unit. That makes sense. Okay, so this activity asks you to think about YouTube from the perspective of this base communication unit, or from the perspective of interpersonal or broadcast communication. So interpersonal or broadcast communication can be defined in a number of ways. The simplest way that we often think about it is that small groups talking face-to-face is interpersonal communication, and a single person or entity sending out a large message is broadcast communication, like the newspaper or the NBC Nightly News or something like that. Another way to think about that, that's probably more meaningful for us in the age of social media, is the rate of the feedback that the sender gets. So down here in this lower image on the corner, the feedback loop. If we get really rapid feedback so that we can change quickly in response to our audience, that pushes us closer to interpersonal communication. So let me repeat that again. If we get really rapid feedback so that we can change in response to how our audience is reacting to what we say, then that pushes us closer to the interpersonal side of this spectrum of broadcast and interpersonal communication. So the opposite is true. If we get really slow feedback, if we're very unresponsive to our audience, that pushes us back towards the broadcast side of things. Okay? So in this week's activity, or the platform for YouTube, that exploration, you're going to be asked to observe a couple different channels on YouTube and think about them in terms of whether they're sitting more towards interpersonal or broadcast communication. So I just want to quickly give a few examples of two channels that that I use, and these are directly off my communication network that I shared with you all earlier. So the first one is PBS NewsHour, right? That's that is a news agency, right, with the goal of putting out information for their audience. And it's kind of interesting on their channel. You can see that by let's pick one of their larger ones. And we don't really need to listen to it because that's not really important here at this point. We can see that they don't even have their comments on. So one of the things that you're going to learn in the article for this week is the elements of YouTube that provide for communication or engagement. The article will use the word engagement a lot, but engagement and communication are kind of the same thing. And so one of the main tools that YouTube provides us for engagement or communication with our audience is comments. This channel doesn't even have their comments turned on. So that feedback, that access to being responsive to their audience, at least through YouTube, is going to be dulled or weakened because they don't have comments turned on. Right, so they're going to be less responsive to their audience and fall much more towards traditional broadcast style of communication. There's a caveat in there in that none of these like media agencies nowadays are just hanging out in one channel, right? PBS NewsHour is also a TV show. They also have a strong Twitter stream. So they are not getting from their perspective, they're getting multiple sources of input, probably lots of audience feedback from Twitter, not so much from their TV, and less here from their YouTube, but more than the TV, because while they don't have their comments on, you can like or dislike their show or their individual videos. And you can also share, although as audience members, we can't really see how much that's getting shared. At least I can't at the moment. Okay, so that kind of out of order pointed out a little bit some of the things that we get to look at for engagement. So let me go back here. This is a quick review. It's in the article as well. But when we're looking at engagement or the ways in which a channel tries to communicate with its audience, some of our tools here are the number of views, and then the CIA head and that again, the number of likes and dislikes, and particularly the ratio between likes and dislikes. So raw numbers as well as relative percentages within them, and then commenting. And so those are kind of the main tools we get from YouTube. You can be a producer of information, like PBS here is the producer, or you can be a consumer, which is like us watching it, right? That's sort of big categorization of it. And then within that, there is tools for the producer and the consumer to communicate, okay? And in this case, they have one of the main ones turned off, which pushes them towards broadcast versus interpersonal communication. Makes them less responsive to their audience. Okay, now one of the other ones that I said that I watch for entertainment more is the Red Bull Surfing channel. We can look at all those same features about their views and dislikes and likes. But one thing you'll notice with this one is that they my internet's a little slow, but they definitely have their comment stream on. So we'll give it just a second here. Oof. So first of all, you'll notice with this stream, way more likes than dislikes. That's interesting. Their audience is much more encouraging. And you'll, in that article that you're about to read, there's some interesting stuff on gender and social media. And this particular video I just picked here, I didn't really think about it, but it is about female surfers. And one of the things the article talks about is the differences between positive affirmation and negative affirmation between males and females on social media. And the article says that females are more likely to give positive encouragement and males negative. And that's very interesting. And just in this particular one, there's some indication that might be true, because a lot of the other videos have a higher a higher ratio of likes and dislikes, so that's closer to 1. Like this is, yeah. Okay, so certainly this one has the comment streams on it, and it's very, very active. So that's an indication that this channel is probably much more responsive to their audience. They're at least allowing conversation to go on between them and their audience, as well as between the audience members themselves. So, and then the thing we would check is I hesitate to do anything on my internet right now, but the thing we would check when we go back to their actual channel is like, can we find evidence in the flow of videos that they're changing the content of their videos with respect to what their audience is liking or disliking? And that's the same thing we could ask with the NPR site as well. Okay, that's a fair amount of information in one video, so I'm gonna stop here, and probably over the course of the week, I'll put a couple other little videos out that just kind of go into some more detail here and there. And as always, please get a hold of me with any questions, and I will be talking to you all later.